Hey everybody, Joe Joseph here for thedailysheeple.com, and this is your news shot. Bloomberg has a piece, rich retirees are hoarding cash out of fear. That's right. They say while younger generations get poorer, older Americans can't seem to spend it all. Of course, you're talking about the baby boom generation, mainly, that's starting to enter the retirement age. And of course, they oversaw some of the most prosperous times in American history. And I know you can look at the inflation period of the late 70s, the mid to late 70s and early 80s, the energy crisis, things like that. But by and large, they lived in the most prosperous time with the most prosperous benefits, with the most lucrative type of wages. And when I say that, I mean with the middle and the lower class, not the upper class, if you will. And now they're having trouble. They see the writing on the wall. And I'm going to get into this in a second because this reminded me of a Bible story that's so fitting. But a lot of the older generation sees the writing on the wall. And they're hoarding their money because they see trouble coming. And the younger generations, let me tell you something. It's going to be a train wreck by the time my generation retires and, the millennials retire. If they even get to that, if we even get to that, because the system is doomed to fail. It is, if you take a look at unfunded liabilities here in the United States, not going to happen. Not going to happen. We need a serious change, of course. But it says there's a time in everyone's life to save, and there's also a time when you're supposed to spend. And that time is commonly known as retirement. Millions of Americans aren't doing that, however, which has put the U.S. in a perverse situation. Younger generations aren't saving enough as their income slips further behind previous generations. Older Americans, meanwhile, sit atop unprecedented piles of assets building through stock market and real estate booms. Yet these retirees, or at least the affluent ones, aren't spending it. It turns out they're afraid of the unknown. Let me stop there. Are they afraid of the unknown? Or do they know something's coming? And this reminded me of a story from the book of Daniel in the Bible that I find very fitting, and I think that we can learn a lesson from this here in the United States, especially our non-representing representatives. Not that they would ever learn a lesson about anything. They only care about not getting caught. But I want to share this story with you now. If you're not familiar with it, even if you don't subscribe or believe the Bible, this story here shows what happens when the moral of the story is karma is a bitch. And it's called The Writing on the Wall. This is Daniel chapter 5. It says, many years later, King Belshazzar gave a great feast. Of course, Belshazzar was the king of Babylon, the last king of Babylon. It says, many years later, King Belshazzar gave a great feast for 1,000 of his nobles, and he drank wine with them. And while Belshazzar was drinking the wine, he gave orders to bring in the gold and silver cups that his predecessor, Nebuchadnezzar, his dad, had taken from the temple in Jerusalem. He wanted to drink from them and with his nobles, his wives, and his concubines. So they brought these golden cups taken from the temple, the house of God in Jerusalem, and the kings and his nobles, his wives, and his concubines drank from them. And while they drank from them, then they praised their idols made of gold and silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. When suddenly they saw the fingers of a human hand writing on the plaster wall of the king's palace near the lampstand. The king himself saw the hand as it wrote, and his face turned pale with fright. His knees knocked together in fear, and his legs gave way beneath him. The king shouted for the enchanters, the astrologers, and the fortune tellers to be brought before him. He said to these wise men of Babylon, whoever can read this writing and tell me what it means will be dressed in purple robes and of royal honor, and will have a gold chain placed around his neck. He will become the third highest ruler in the kingdom. But when all the king's wise men had come in, none of them could read the writing on the wall and what it meant. So the king grew even more alarmed, and his face turned pale. His nobles were shaken. But the queen mother heard what was happening, and she hurried to the banquet hall. She said to Belshazzar, long live the king. Don't be so pale and frightened. There is a man in your kingdom who has within him the spirit of the holy gods. During Nebuchadnezzar's reign, this man was found to have insight, understanding, and wisdom like that of the gods. Your predecessor, the king, your predecessor, King Nebuchadnezzar, made him chief over all the magicians, the enchanters, the astrologers, and the fortune tellers of Babylon. This man, Daniel, whom the king called Belteshazzar, had exceptional ability and is filled with divine knowledge and understanding. He can interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve difficult problems. Call for Daniel, and he will tell you what the writing means. So Daniel was brought in before the king, and the king asked him, "Are you Daniel, one of the exiles brought from Judah by my predecessor, King Nebuchadnezzar? I've heard that you have the spirit of the gods within you, and that you are filled with insight, understanding, and wisdom. My wise men and enchanters have tried to read the words on the wall and tell me their meaning, but they can't do it. I am told that you can give interpretations and solve difficult problems. If you can read these words and tell me their meaning, you will be clothed in purple robes of royal honor, and you'll be given a gold chain placed around your neck, and will become the third highest ruler in Jerusalem." Daniel answered the king, said, quote, "Keep your gifts or give them to someone else, but I will tell you what the writing means. Your Majesty, the Most High God, gave sovereignty, majesty, glory, and honor to your predecessor Nebuchadnezzar. He made him so great that people of all races, nations, and languages trembled before him in fear. He killed those he wanted to kill and spared those he wanted to spare. He honored those he wanted to honor and disgraced those he wanted to disgrace. But when his heart and his mind were puffed up with arrogance, he was brought down from his royal throne and stripped of his glory. He was driven from human society. He was given the mind of a wild animal, and he lived among the wild donkeys. He ate grass like a cow, and he was drenched with the dew of heaven until he learned that the Most High God rules over the kingdoms of the world and appoints anyone he desires to rule over them. You are his successor, O Belshazzar, and you knew of this, yet you have not humbled yourself, for you have proudly defied the Lord of heaven and have had these cups from his temple brought before you. You and your nobles and your wives and concubines have been drinking wine from them and praising the gods of silver, gold, bronze, iron, wood, and stone, gods that neither see nor hear nor know anything at all. But you have not honored the God who gives you the breath of life and controls your destiny. So God has sent you this hand to write this message. And this message that was written was Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. And this is what the words mean. Mene means numbered, or God has numbered the days of your reign and has brought it to an end. Tekel means weighed. You have been weighed on the balances and have not measured up. And Upharsin means divided. Your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Then at Belshazzar's command, Daniel was dressed in purple robes, given a chain of gold, and was proclaimed the third highest ruler in the kingdom. Well, that very night, folks, that very night, Belshazzar was killed. And Darius the Mede took over the kingdom at the age of 62. Why? Because the Medes and the Persians snuck in and took over Babylon in one night. I mean, it was crazy. And it was because Babylon was given the opportunity and they failed. Babylon was given the opportunity to do good and understand. And Belshazzar, the son of Nebuchadnezzar, never learned those lessons. As a matter of fact, Nebuchadnezzar wrote about this. And the lessons that he learned was hard, but he learned them. And his son, just, of course, money and power. I mean, what corrupts more than that? So very interesting. You know, we in the United States, we oftentimes ignore the acts of our non-representing representatives, but we have to understand at the end of the day that their actions, whether or not we sit silent or are active, we are responsible for their actions. But if you speak out and you call them on their wrongdoings and you try to educate people as to what the right way of doing things are, how this country was founded from its very creation, what it all means, the opportunity that we had, that we could have again, if we would just come correct and live by the simple rules that Jesus put out thousands of years ago. Love each other and treat people the way you want to be treated. If we can do those two things, my friends, two things, we would solve all the problems we have, and life would be wonderful in this country. I'm Joe Joseph. This was thedailysheeple.com's News Shot. Feel free to comment below and visit our website at thedailysheeple.com.